Let's do this. What's up, Monica Perez? How are
Hey,
you?
Clint. Great. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I had two things going in my ear at the same time, and I forgot to shut one of them off. So I heard myself talking to myself, and I thought, it's official. I've lost my brain. I'm now. All right. So we've done a good job of this the last 2 or 3 weeks based off a suggestion that you made 3 or 4 weeks ago. Hey, start off with a question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You've done your research.
I have done a little research.
We're going to talk.
Last time you said you gave me a different question, a question you hadn't mentioned before. I was like, what?
No, we're starting the first part of it's pretty consistent. We start with amendments the last 3 or 4 weeks. So today's amendment, ma'am, is
the Ninth Amendment.
The Ninth Amendment.
That was, you threw me for a loop there. I didn't expect that one.
Which one did you expect?
The fourth.
No, I like going around. I was going to get
the fourth. You're right. You're right. It's
Tell
more
me
fun.
about it.
All right. The Ninth Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. From what I understand, I mean, I didn't do a ton of research, but I just tried to refresh my memory. There was always this debate among the founders that we shouldn't have a Bill of Rights because that would make people think that it was exhaustive and that other rights didn't exist. Now, I believe that, but I think it's very clear what the Bill of Rights is all about. The Bill of Rights is enumerating specific rights that the government would be tempted to violate in its own interest. So they don't talk about your right to eat, maybe they should, but your right to eat junk food. They should actually. But anyway, they don't talk about that. No, I mean, they should. I almost feel like they should have enumerated at least the rights to make decisions about your own health and well-being. But anyway,
I mean, like if you're in New York City, you can drink any size,
soda you want.
I
know. The founders did not anticipate a Mayor Bloomberg. I can assure you that.
A lot of the crap we're doing to ourselves nowadays.
I actually think they did more than it's argued. I think that argument is used to undermine their intentions. But I'll tell you about the Ninth Amendment. Go ahead.
Finish. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go.
So it's just to answer that problem. And I have always been a big fan of George Mason because he was, I think he insisted on it, or he was a big champion of enumerated rights. And if you go and look, something I tweeted today, I think it was the Declaration of Rights and associated with the Virginia Constitution. He was responsible for that today.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's better. I think it's kind of better than the one we've got. But anyway, so I highly recommend that people look at that. And so one thing that I think is important about rights in general for people to understand, and that the Ninth Amendment really points to, is if you have rights that are not enumerated by the government, where do they come from? This is a rhetorical question for you, Clint, and I think you know the answer. Where the rights come from?
The rights come from God,
us
or being here,
nature, or the
inherent
sovereign autonomy of the human being. So when people argue that the Bill of Rights do not apply to foreigners or terrorists or Guantanamo or whatever, I challenge them to say, well, then where did the rights come from? Are you saying those rights only apply to Americans? Are you saying those rights are given by the U.S. government? So I think the Ninth Amendment identifies that these are making it very clear that we are on to what government is after. Government is our enemy, really. We get duped into to consenting to it or thinking that we consent to it, but it's bad and it needs to be restrained if it exists at all. And it is definitely going to try to do all those things in the Bill of Rights. And it is doing those things. It's every single Bill of Rights, I would say, is violated. And then by that same token, we have to just defend ourselves against government by those particular rights. But everything else we have the right to do. That is what the Ninth Amendment is about, I think.
Well, here's what I'll say. A couple things, and we'll say hi. Hi, Daryl and John that have joined us. Thank you
hey,
both
guys.
for jumping on. I have a couple things. First of all, I think one of the best ways to protect ourselves is read. I'm learning. I mean, I say that, and I've said it forever, and I've talked about this. I used to read a lot more, but the best way to protect yourself, you don't know what to protect yourself from or go pursue if you don't actually read why we're here in the beginning, or how it started, or what was really meant by it, or different interpretations. But you said something when we cracked this thing open that you think that our founding fathers knew more than we give them credit for sometimes, and I agree. But I will say this, I actually had this conversation this morning with somebody, and I said to them, whether it was intentional or by accident, how lucky and blessed we are to live in a country that has put up the boundaries for us to bounce inside of and figure this thing out called human nature. Because the Bill of Rights, when we say it's, protects the rights that have been given to us by God, a lot of countries don't have that. A lot of types of leadership and governmental style, they don't even care. They don't even pretend to care about that.
Yes, I think they do pretend to care, but I am a big advocate of the actual Bill of Rights written down, enumerated, and that's why I am not in favor of the Convention of States, or when people want to, maybe I don't get that right. People always push back on me when I say I'm not in favor of any kind of wholesale reconstruction of the Constitution, because I think it's written as well as you're going to get for a government, a coercive government. I feel like I like the Articles of Confederation better, but the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were a hard-fought, hard-won compromise. And if it's not going to be written better, and I do think the fact that it's on a piece of paper and we can point to it and we can rally around it, that makes it harder for them to just completely subvert it. And I think all the countries of the world look to us and hold that their own governments to that standard in a way so that when we fall, they all fall. They have not fallen yet because we have not fallen yet. We are falling right now, but
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that's where the frustration comes from a lot of people who kind of admit what you said. We are flawed people, and flawed people orchestrated this thing, and they put a system in place where we can work out our evils and we can take advantage of our goods and we can work towards betterment. But I think there's actually a movement to tear that completely down. And what's going to be left in its stead is a power vacuum. And we look around the world.
Let's talk about what you're saying, because explain it to me again, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I just said, and then we'll get John on here, and Daryl agrees with you, as most people should, Daryl. Thank you. Daryl, most people should agree with Monica. Let's just be honest. I just think that and I don't know what part of that you want me to repeat. I just think there's a movement afoot, No,
before that, I want to understand your premise. Your premise is that we have the American experiment, and it's a place for us to grow as people, or
as a society, life. Because I'm going to combine two things at once. We had a response on YouTube that said against all government, and it was long and it was thought out. And we don't need the government when we can have, if we had our own tanks and we could have our own guns and we could have our own exchanges amongst the community. Well, that is great, but this human experience, this American experience that we had, this experiment, has been put in place, and I think with the human nature embedded in it. In other words, a lot of times when we talk about these things on this podcast, we take reality out of it. And I've said this before, we point and say, this is ideal, this is what we meant. But at the end of the day, there's never been a system in place that human nature gets involved and it doesn't go to power hungry or corruption ever in the history of the world. Even religions, whatever religion, even atheism, even that movement, everybody has human nature. Okay. And we've put the system in place that has allowed us to have this exchange of ideas of what I believe and you believe, and learn to compromise and learn to what we can live with and without, and still somehow contribute, I think, more to the society than ever before. Anybody in other countries.
What you're saying is basically what I was thinking the moment I gave up on government and very shortly thereafter became an anarcho-capitalist, which is this. I realized that So the Articles of Confederation would have not provided the seat of power that the Constitution did. But the Articles of Confederation only lasted 10 years. So obviously it is not tolerated by the elite who actually have the final say. So then you had the Constitution, which was a subversion of the Articles of Confederation, illegally passed. There's no method for the Articles of Confederation to yield to a different foundational document. But so here we have the best that could realistically happen, which was the Constitution, the American experiment. Looks pretty good. But the fact is, it was a central seat of power with monopoly on the use of force. And that in itself, you can look at a dozen or 1,000 or 5 turning points in the history of this country since 1776 or 1783 or whatever it was that the Constitution was passed. Then you go back and you can look at each and every one of those turning points and say, see, this was the beginning of the end. This was the beginning of the end. Maybe the inherent fact that slavery was the foundation of the country was the beginning of the end. The Civil War, the beginning of the end. World War I, I think, was the beginning of the end. But it didn't work because that monopoly,
what didn't work?
The American experiment is a failure, and it was the only possibility for a self-limiting government was the American experiment. I think we agree on that. And what I'm saying is it failed. So now we know a piece of paper is never going to stop a coercive monopoly entity, a territorial monopoly on the use of force, from serving its own interests. And those interests are the interests that are hijacked by the people who control or plug in at the top like that. So that's where we are. And that is why we do not actually need the monopoly coercive government. That's a scam for your mind. If you want to have governance, that's okay. But the state that is just simply violence, coercive violence, is not the answer. It cannot be controlled. You have to protect your own property. You have to retain the use of force exclusively in your own hands.
I agree with so much of that. I guess there's 2 or 3 things to come up. And then if you're okay with, I'll say what I got to say. You say what you got to say. And then let's get to some of these people that are making comments.
Okay.
But you said something about the elite. You know, the elite didn't like the Articles of Confederation. I don't know of a form of government where the elite do not get to the top. Those with the most power make the rules.
The Articles of Confederation did not have the right to tax.
But what I'm saying is,
that's why it was okay.
I got it. But my point on that is the Articles of Confederation, if it had prevented the elite from taking over and creating a form of government that was going to be expansive, it would have done that. Like you said, if you're saying the Constitution can't prevent it, neither can a document like the Articles of Confederation, because none of them. The Constitution
provided the mechanism for it, and that's why they had to put that in, because it provided a strong national government, which the Articles of Confederation didn't. That was basically a free trade, free movement agreement, kind of.
I would submit that if you took the Articles of Confederation and put into an empty country right now with people, eventually we would have the same evolution of where we're at, because human beings.
Well, but it's not like that. It was an agreement among 13 countries.
Right, but
so if you made it, it doesn't make sense to say that it would be the foundational document of a country. It was the foundational document of a free association.
All it takes, though, and this goes back to what that YouTube comments when we were talking about, you don't need a standing military.
Yes,
that might have been great 200 years ago. My theory on this is now. Well, here's why I'm saying that. Here's why I'm saying that.
Careful,
because
that's a trap.
Well, as soon as we have 10 neighborhoods that are even, or communities, and we all have access to the same guns and weapons, you can take 100 people. All it takes is 10 to have ill intent. They're going to go take more from other people. They're going to capture it. They're going to come take your stuff.
No way.
Okay.
That's the whole, because now what we have now is those 10 people get to take the apparatus of government and control the 90 people from defending themselves. The 10 reprobates are not going to beat the 90 productive property holders who are well armed. You can see that in your family. Are the criminals the ones who run the show? Or the criminals the one who end up sleeping on the back porch because you locked them out and hoping that you throw them some food when they sober up?
I get that, but we also see it when criminals get together in bunches of thousands, no matter if they're white, black, or green across the world in time, they can enact upon you. And unless you have the right to defend yourself, see, I'm not saying it's got to be one or the other. I'm just saying once you remove the form of government, especially when you say the form of military, I think you're opening yourself up to whoever the biggest asshole on the block is. You are subject now to fall underneath them because you're a good person. Well,
why? Self-defense is a good thing. If you're a good person, you will defend yourself, and that person.
I agree with
chaos is the function of a disordered mind. Now, okay, so you're saying that the government mobs, like, okay, so you're saying that the mafia would run everything.
I think evil.
Who would run it?
I don't know. I'm saying this: evil people will always try to get upper hand on good people unless good people can defend themselves.
And what I'm saying is that the evil people would have to figure out a way to subordinate you.
Right.
If you didn't give them a government they could take over that was doing it for them.
Well, we see that in history.
That's the problem, is that the government is the seat of that evil power. And as far as like having a mafia goes, the only reason the mafia gets outsized profits is that the government enforces black markets so that they have monopolies on really expensive stuff. That's it. They wouldn't even exist without the government.
If you have 15 clans or tribes or neighborhoods around history forever, there's movies made about this where one tribe wants more power. There are.
That's not history.
No, it's not history, but we can read books. We can read history. There are tribes and Vikings that go and try to conquer. Bad people try to conquer good people. The good people defend themselves, and it goes great until a bad person gets control of that government. People die, people retire, people get overthrown. And next thing you know, instead of being a placid society where you're protecting yourself and you're good defending, well, why don't we just take over the neighbors too and invite them in? And if they don't want to, we'll take their crap. Unfortunately, I think you've got to take in that human nature. You can have the perfect.
But you're describing governments.
I'm describing humans.
You're describing war. You're describing Hitler and Stalin. You're describing the people who are doing that on a mass scale, and they do it because then they get the right.
How do you counter that? How do you counter Hitler and Stalin?
Let's take the example. I was talking to some guys yesterday on a video. They brought up the example of Ireland. Ireland was a bunch. It was totally decentralized, kind of tribal, and the English, who could basically conquer the world, could not conquer their backyard because there was no central seat that they could just go in and cut the head off and put a new head in place. That decentralization was a great strength to the Irish, and the problems come in when there's legitimacy and then all the other countries and governments recognize the legitimacy of the one that is oppressing you, and there's no place for you to go. So you try to get away, and what are you going to do? You're going to go to somebody else who claims the right that God gave them in the divine king times, and now it's your neighbor through democracy gave it that right, but it's so much of it is the mind control. So you're arguing with me that I should consent to this because it's for my own good, because you believe that. That's the power of the righteousness of the state. Whereas if we were just on our own, I would say, what the hell are you talking about? No, you can't have my stuff.
I got it. Okay, I get that. Until the next door neighbor can't do what you can do to defend your stuff, and then all of a sudden you have the enemy that took over their house.
But that's what relationships, that's what insurance is for. That's what associations are for. You're just saying that the association you want has to be forced. I can't opt out and choose a different one. If I want, people are talking about private police forces. That's fine, as long as that private police force is not paid for by taxes. I want a private police force that I decide if it doesn't do its job and I'm going to continue to pay its bills, it has to pay me back for when my car is stolen and they don't return it. And I think that's the way it works.
And I think what I'm hearing, and I think what I hope people are hearing and you're hearing, is I think the compromise is in the middle. I don't think it's if everybody wants to point to the utopia of everybody just leave everybody alone, you can have a tank, you can have a battleship, and you can have your own communities and you can do your thing. That would never, ever, ever work in the history of the world, because there's going to be people that they're evil people that are going to take your stuff. But the flip side of it is, I also don't think the answer is a huge government that tells everybody what to do.
All I'm saying is The answer is not a huge government
I agree
that
with
can
that.
force you at the point of a gun to pay for their bullshit cops who are there to get the money from you at the point of a gun. They're not there to keep you from getting your car stolen. They're there to make sure you pay their salary and all the payola on the top. And I'm not even dissing cops. I'm not a hater. I don't care. I'm just saying there are 1,000 possible solutions, 1 million, 1 trillion, 7 billion possible solutions to how you want to handle self-defense. And the only one I don't agree with is the one that requires somebody who doesn't want to go along with it to pay taxes for your system.
And here's what I would say, and I think we come to this point, and this is why I'm smiling, because the system we've put in place has allowed us to have this conversation, and you can't have this conversation in a lot of countries. You can't do this in a lot of places. Well,
because of governments. I'm saying that the liberty would always have it.
That's my point. Well, you can try this in other places and not get it.
I will give you that. The remnants of the American experiment still gives us a level of superiority over some other countries, not all.
And I think that's where people are afraid that we're going to give up on the American experiment instead of realizing it can still be salvaged and work on it if we want to. Through dialogue, debate, votes, and calling people out. We're just not going to do that.
I'm giving up. I've been doing that for 8.5 years. I've been really trying on WSB and privately, but WSB, the #1 news talk station in the country, is what they always said when I was there. And I was trying to tell conservatives and Republicans to defend the Bill of Rights to the death. And when Trump came along and said, I made Maxine Waters cry, and then people tell me that I'm quibbling about semantics when I read the Constitution to them now, I can tell you I have tried to tell people that this is our last chance, and I think it's over. I think it's over.
We have comments here, but let's show this one because this one makes me look bad, and I want to talk about it real quick. This is the most recent one. Clint, that circular reasoning we need to government to protect us from the subordinating to a government. I agree with what you're saying to a point, except I've done a really poor job of saying this. It's the combination of the two. And, I took philosophy in college too, and it is a circular argument, except when you look at stuff like an HOA. Everybody moves into a neighborhood, they start voting and put people in place, and they have to have the ability to get those people out. We have given up our ability to control our government.
Hold on. So what's wrong? Yeah. The HOA is perfect, right? What happens when somebody breaks the rules?
No, it's not. See, I know people right now that have horrible experience with HOA. You know why?
And
people get in charge. Why? People get in charge of it, and they start changing the rules, and there's chaos. And if there was not a way to change the rules that everybody had to say so, then they're stuck. They're stuck. I know people right now are suing their HOAs because of things. And I'm just saying, again, it's a human nature. It's a human nature thing.
This is what you have to do then. What you would have to do, and maybe experience would take the contract, alter the HOA contracts going forward as people learn about this stuff. If they violate the rules, which should have been immutable when you signed up your contract, then you don't need to follow their rules anymore. It dissolves the association. It's a de facto secession. What's wrong with that?
Okay. So my other question to you is, if we're putting our hands, if you say we're going to have insurance companies and attorneys, and it's just all going to become litigious or whatever it is, human natures are going to be in charge of that too. I just think we're factoring out.
I'm telling you, the answer is individual sovereignty and personal self-defense. There's no charge.
But I'm not arguing with the personal.
And I'm not going to get railroaded if I'm not. You're suggesting I give someone else my gun and hope they don't use it.
Why would I? When have I said I want you to give somebody else your gun?
That's what this monopoly on force is. That's what they're doing with it.
I've got 3 guns right here. I'm not advocating anybody taking my guns.
I'm telling you, this is what they're doing with it. They're coming for you. They're not coming right now because you're in Tennessee, but I'm in California. They came and they went already. It's over. And they're coming for you.
And whose fault is this? Is it the governments we put in place, or are we the people?
I would say,
because I blame us.
It's us. Yeah. We have not defended it. And I have to say, I've been trying to wake people up, and they don't want to be woken up. They don't want to take the hard path before it's too late. And that's why my conclusion is right now, at this moment in time, as another layer gets peeled from my eyes, I think that the answer is that you have to take sovereignty back on an individual basis, which is so liberating. It's such a wonderful, freeing idea that as long as, my plan 5 years out from now is I'm going to be somewhere, probably Texas, which is, they say, not a great place for this, but I'm going to have some land, and I'm going to have to defend it against that monopoly on violence, that monopoly on the use of force that will come and tell me what I can and can't do on my land. So I'll have to go to the city hall, I'll have to go to the meetings, I'll have to go to the politicians, and I'll have to push papers around just to try to keep those violent usurpers of property rights at bay. But when push comes to shove, if enough people live that way and assert their right to self-defense, then maybe they'll get Waco to Ruby Ridged, but maybe not. And maybe that's just the point of, maybe that's what it takes to be free.
Okay. So my question is, and maybe this will help me understand it a little more. If you could go back into American history and point to a time that said that is how it's supposed to be, or another form of government, or not to take government out of it, another form of living, and say this was how it was supposed to be, I would love to see it, because the way I look at it is every time there has been these autonomous individual neighborhoods, groups, clans, or tribes, it's always been somebody that's moved in, captured, taken, and everybody has to pick a side. And inside side, there's organization, and that organization's always led to some form of government.
Yeah. Okay. You are saying the problem, which is government is always usurped. If I were going to take a moment to direct people to, I would tell them to listen to read the speech that Patrick Henry gave against the Constitution. And he admonishes people. He says, we're not going to be able to keep this system if the citizens do not farm, if they lose connection with the land. So Albert J. Nock, in Our Enemy the State, explains that there was always a battle, or there was a battle at the founding of this country between the farmers of the past, the agricultural society, versus the merchant society that was emerging. And right now we have the technocracy that's emerging. And he says they were both just forms that had an elite that wanted to control the governments for their own interests. And that's definitely true.
Yeah,
it is true. But it's a lot easier to maintain your sovereignty and defend it if you have the means to eat. So you can, but if you say, where is the moment in time? I mean, I'm going down that road right now to try to distinguish whether there's a point at which it's reductio ad absurdum, where you can say,
don't start using words like that with me. You know better.
Reduce the argument to the point of absurdity.
Just trying to insert a little levity.
Thank you. So anyway, you can go back and say the invention of fire was the beginning of the end, or growing things was the beginning of the end. The agricultural revolution. To me, I've always thought this before.
I've heard you say it.
The agricultural revolution, the Garden of Eden, the fall of man was the agricultural revolution. And I'm not happy with that. I really, I love to sleep in a comfy bed and have air conditioning and love all that stuff. I hated growing up in New York without air conditioning, tons of mosquitoes. It was just disgusting. I hated it. But I feel like if you need that kind of organization, I mean, it has to be small.
I just don't think you're going to start a society, even if you have a neighborhood. Okay. I guess my neighborhood thing was an example of, even when you put groups of homes together, they're going to find a way to organize and eventually have somebody that's in charge of stuff, even on a small scale.
I don't think it has to be that way, but I would say
an example where it's at.
Well, lots of neighborhoods in Brooklyn used to have block parties and stuff, and nobody had a boss, and they would bring each other dinner when somebody's baby was born.
Those people are inside the government. I understand that. I'm just saying, whenever you get a group of people together, the reason they didn't is because they lived in something that the expectations were set for them. It wasn't an HOA, but they still inside the confines of the government. Of the United States.
Culture. And I'm not saying there's no governance. I'm saying that it would be better to have no state. And I would also say that maybe the answer is what Thomas Jefferson said, and that you have to have a reset on a regular basis. Now, he said that the tree of liberty is whatever, fed by the blood of tyrants and patriots. and because he was defending the possibility of a coercive territorial monopoly on force kind of government. And he was even then saying that you need to have a reset all the time. And maybe that's true. So why argue against that reset? I am not a big fan of revolution. That's why I'm really happy that I've thought of the idea that you could actually assert your liberty individually. But if people want to try revolution, it might be time.
All right. Here we're going to do. We got 30 minutes left, and so I'm going to say 2 or 3 things, and then I want to go.
Oh my gosh!
Well, I'm going to go through all the comments, and you're going to comment on them.
Okay,
Not me.
I want to read the comments.
Yeah, not me, because this people care about what you say more than me. But I want to tell you this: I have enjoyed the last 30 minutes very much. I hope you're. Thank you so much. I'm stuck in a house by myself. My dog is like, damn it! Will somebody else listen to this old? So
you are not old.
Don't you enjoy it? But hadn't this been fun?
Yes, super fun.
I love this stuff. Fun. Okay, so let's go through comments. Monica, you can read them or I'll read them, but you answer, and then I want to get to some tweets. I want to get to some tweets. I
don't care about the tweets. I'd much rather have the comments. But
yeah,
keep going.
Here we go. But there's one I got to ask you about. There's one tweet I got to ask you about.
Okay.
I'll put them up quick. John Ballinger, as long as there's been existence, there was good and evil. There must be some type of man laws to hold a standard. Rights are simply given in the form of how much the citizens are willing to self-police their own personal.
Oh yeah, I think that's right. We do have laws, culture, and that absolutely emerges. Society is self-ordering. You own a store, somebody else owns a house, you guys get together and you build a road, you get the Knights Templar, whoever were the original policemen and bankers, to walk along that road with you so you don't get attacked. And culture emerges, families emerge, churches emerge. Look, billions of people belong to the really big established religions. Billions of people right now belong to those religions. Why? Because they are willing and interested in policing themselves, in having a value-based community, in giving charity. That's voluntary taxation. This is a normal human nature concept. And if we're not naturally disposed towards society and norms in those society, then government isn't going to work any better than voluntary.
I concur that our laws are given by the Creator. However, the longer our country exists, the further we will move away from the original foundations of God's law.
I agree with that. And I think they want to hasten that process, which is why the first thing that went during this aggression, this COVID policy, was churches.
This will be the only time you ever read this. Are you ready for this? Agree, Clint. Let's just stop there. Let's just move on to the next thing. I think that's enough.
Let's just have a moment.
Absolutely. Can we bookmark this shit right here? Dang it.
I don't know what time is it.
Every weekend, this is like getting my ass kicked in verbal karate.
40 minutes in.
Human nature is our downfall due to not being willing to discipline and not winning against one another, whether it's government, business, or each other. So
I think I am beginning to have a real fundamental change in my viewpoint of what it means to be truly free and to be truly true to the better side of human nature. And I am beginning to think like the way my uncle, who was a priest, used to say, oh, Italy is where you want to be. And even the South, the Southern United States, South America, anything South, he said, because they understand the value without putting dollar signs next to it, it's not all consumption, that leisure and interaction, relationships, those things, a good meal and time after that really have value. And that's the kind of thing that I think is they deliberately cultivate that, an end to that, because it's the consumption and the transactions that yield taxes and regulations and control. And this is their enemy. And I want to take it back.
I remember, I'm just reading. Our Creator, I cannot read.
Ostensibly gave us laws.
My eyes. I should have my glasses.
I got it. Yeah, you got to wear the glasses.
Yeah.
But what's discussed here is rights, which are ours based on our humanity. Yes, I try to talk about that it's God's law or human nature or inherent in us. And there's some people I respect who don't even think there is such a concept as natural rights. And I don't know, I never really go that far down, but I think I could, and I think I would end up in the right place, which would be, it's the same thing.
Republican. No, I'm sorry.
Nobody willingly admits to being a Republican. I'm a Republican, but I'm really conservative. So that you go down to the place where it's like the libertarian idea of like my rights end where somebody else's begins, or your rights end where somebody else's begins. You could identify rights simply by using that expression, and it doesn't. And that in itself, it's not really a tautology, but it's self-defining, and you don't have to even attribute where it came from. They're self-evident. Franny says,
Franny, it seems those who hold the power use the force on citizens to take away our constitutional rights, ripping our Bill of Rights to shreds. There we go. That's a good comment.
Yes, and that is exactly what we bring us back to the 9th Amendment.
Yes,
because the first 8 amendments they were just there. The 9th Amendment clarifies we only wrote these first 8 down because government cannot be trusted. And those are the exact things that they are going to have to do to get the better of you. Now, the 9th Amendment says everything else, of course, you have the right to do. We are only defining this because the government needs it spelled out, or it will legalize you or terrorize you into giving that stuff up. There needs to be a black and white line here. Of course, it lasted some time, but not, I mean, we're done with it. It's done now.
The most evil system that has been hijacked that would have allowed our system is the legal system. If we still had a justice system, we wouldn't be as degraded as we are today.
Yes, I agree. And this was a watershed moment for me when I realized that being a libertarian, Murray Rothbard and Ron Paul both, I think, have this principle: always take any liberty you can get, never say no. And so libertarians who subscribe to that would say that plea bargains are fine. Plea bargains are okay because it's my right to give up my rights. And I have concluded, especially in a world of just complete propaganda, total media control. Yes, we have free will and all that, but this is an intergenerational attack on our humanity, our individual rights, and they know what they're doing and putting in these plea bargains. 99% of all convictions are without a jury trial. And libertarians will say that's just fine because I have a right to give up my jury trial right. It has absolutely destroyed the system, and it has given enough resources. It has freed up the resources so that they can have all sorts of laws that are totally unconstitutional, completely against our rights, drug laws and stuff like that. If they had to go to a jury trial for every single solitary conviction they wanted, they'd have to eliminate all those laws that are unjust. The system works perfectly if you keep it within the realm of fundamental law.
Works perfectly if you don't have human beings involved in it.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it. Okay, but I'm saying that the legal system as set up would work.
Yeah.
If we held to it. That's the thing with the Constitution. It's brilliant in that it would be good enough.
I think there should be a small group of patriots that look at the systems that have been hijacked and go, we're not going to say it's over. We're going to say we need to rethink how we defend it.
Restore the Constitution. How else could we defend it?
I don't know.
That's the thing. This is why I have the idea. I think, and I'm not the first one, obviously, I'm the last one. But I have this idea that the only way to defend it is to reassert your individual liberty physically. But I have been arguing for the past 8.5 years. I've been using the First Amendment, and I've been saying I am the press, and I am assembly, and I am petitioning, and I am doing all these things because this is the system. I get deplatformed. But this is the system, and I want to reform the system within the system. But the system is meant to destroy the liberties that it convinces you it's
it is the system that we've allowed it to become, not as it was intended. And I will say this right now. You will never get kicked off during the break on my platform ever.
But I might get you.
They may take me off, but if I ever have to say
I worry about that.
Hey, don't worry about that. I've got so much.
I'm a little worried.
Franny said self-interest. Let me see. Self-interest usually makes people not get along.
No,
the no-gooders.
No, it makes people get along. Yeah. That's right. And this is what I think is the foundation of love.
Because evil, good, that's law. The people that are going to break the laws are going to break the laws. And that's what I'm saying.
But that's not who we are. That's the thing. Human nature really matters because it really matters. That's why when they do false flags and terrorist attacks that aren't real, they're doing that to convince us that human nature is different or that other kinds of people are fundamentally different.
It only takes, if you walk into a movie theater with 100 people, it only takes one to mess up your thoughts of what a movie theater is. It only takes one to come get a complaint. You can serve 100 great meals a day and get one bad review. And I guess my point on that is it's not like human nature is evil, mostly evil. It doesn't take many though, for everybody to come together and go, we need to protect ourselves from this evil. Come on, everybody. How are we going to do this? Let's organize. Next thing you know, we have a government.
You can't, not next thing you know, there are many, many, many different ways to address that problem. And one of them could be voluntary organization. And most of it is just ostracism.
But I just tried.
It's just ostracism. As Bellamy Fitzpatrick, who I love, the green anarchist, who I'm literally physically going to visit in his forest in New York in a week or two. He said, that there have actually been studies that the best size of a human community is 150 people at the most. And you can really keep track of 100 people. Like that's true. You probably send out, maybe not you because you're a guy, but probably send out like 100, 150 Christmas cards. Unless you're a big organization or a big old family or whatever. But, personally, you really can only maintain that number of relationships, and then you can maintain the relationships. So his example was, if you had that kind of a society and Bill Gates walked around and started slapping people around and saying, I'm going to shoot you up with these microbes and give you a tattoo or whatever, he'd be an asshole and he would have no friends. But instead, he's got an army behind him of propagandists and force users, and you're going to get your vax tat.
Okay, you have to go in a minute, but we got to get to these comments. My question is, when you say there's many other ways, when I ask, point to one that we can all aspire to in history, I don't see a form of any government or lack of government.
I just gave you the thing of Ireland.
I got that. And Ireland is not near as diverse as we are, or has the impact that we have, or has as many people as we have.
But that's the problem. That's what people say, that the Civil War had to keep the country together. It would have been better apart, that the Constitution was better than the Articles of Confederation.
So we got to figure out how to make it work now.
So you're saying, you're saying the only way to make it work is the way it is? It's not working.
We have to work on the way it is. I don't think.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying we need to. I'm saying I don't have all the answers. I know giving up and giving into the chaos and revolt is not the answer, and I know moving down the track that has put so many people in a bad spot is not.
I want to answer the question that you keep bringing up, which is, give me an example of how the society that you're advocating has existed and worked in the past. I don't think that kind of society is something that rises to the level of historical treatment. It's more of an anthropological thing, where if you have 150 people who are living peacefully in an isolated place and not taking over other countries or even making themselves, destroying their environment or anything like that, you're never going to read about that in a book.
That's right.
And I'm saying, I don't need that example, because I know that the ideologies that are being promoted to me to convince me that the coercive monopoly on force, territorial monopoly on force, is still salvageable. The examples that people are giving me for that are proving false. This American experiment, the only experiment that could have saved the utopian fantasy that governments can be self-limiting, that the state, the coercive monopoly on violence, can limit itself, it can have absolute power and still contain itself. It has proven that cannot happen. So we need something else. And there's probably a billion examples, but they're not examples that any historian is going to sell books about.
And I don't think there's examples, if you break it into smaller groups, and I've said this a bunch, I just don't think there's examples that would last, because you go back to evil people will try to take that ground over.
I disagree. I think that Native Americans probably they were here for 12,000 years. Right. There were bad examples, but there are probably tons of good examples too.
I say that about the American people too. Here we go. Read this one. Hierarchies do not organize. What I'm saying.
Let's get about
whatever. Hierarchy. What did you just whatever me? Hierarchies do not organize by brute force. That's from Brad. Thank you, Brad. John Jasper, get control of the government.
I would like to say, I don't think hierarchy itself is necessarily bad. My family is a hierarchy. Private organizations are a hierarchy. Hierarchy and division of labor may be bad. It may be inherently bad, but I'm not saying that it is inherently bad. What I'm saying is that having a coercive system that is based on force puts a hierarchy in where it rewards force. It gives the people on the top only their interests, and from you it doesn't get cooperation. It doesn't exploit your labor contribution because you are benefiting from the hierarchy and your place in it. It coerces. It says that if you don't continue to maintain the bottom rung of that pyramid, I'm going to shoot you. And that's the hierarchy I object to. And I'm okay with hierarchy.
You and
I'm
will
a Catholic
agree.
For crying out loud. And I think the Pope is not a real Pope. So,
well, you and I will agree.
I can deal with hierarchy even when the guy at the top is bad, because they're not coming to my house and taking me away for that.
Well, see, Ben Shapiro says this all the time. The reason big government, and he's against, he goes, he fights against the big government. He goes, the reason it's bad is because at the end of every argument, when you get into it with the government, they can come to your house with guns and they win. And that's a bad way to run a society.
What's his foreign policy angle, that guy?
I'd have to listen to it. I listen to it all the time, okay. This is from Fanny. The government today has created this violent and warmongering environment. So much of the money they've stolen from us is to build bombs and create unrest worldwide. That's the real mafia, power through force and intimidation. Do you want to say anything to that?
Yes. That is all about how they scare us into thinking that people in other countries are out to get us and that we have to go over to their countries and kill them all before they come over here. But if you look at the causes of 9/11, whether you think it was an inside job or just blowback, there is no narrative that doesn't say we started it.
John Jasper, brute force can be used. The difference is if the people accept the hierarchy as legitimate or criminal.
I don't know what he means by brute force can be used, but the difference may or may not be used. Yeah. If people accept it, then they make the job a lot easier because they will cooperate. Look at, we're having an argument, and I mean, you still think that there's hope for this system, and that keeps it alive.
I don't want to be the one that gives up on the American dream. I just don't want to be that guy.
Oh, well,
see,
you're going to get caught in the tidal wave when it sucks it back out into the ocean.
But you'll get I guess that's my other
Patrick Henry's dream is one you should embrace as the American dream. Patrick Henry, the people who fought. Look up the Whiskey Rebellion.
All right, here we go. Lots of conversations have been stymied in this free country, freedom of speech, assembly, religion, etc., going and gone. I agree, but here's the difference. In a lot of countries, we're actually talking about it right now. I'm not saying it hasn't. I'm not.
I've been deplatformed numerous times,
and we're talking about it still, so people can still find out.
Long.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you think this will go away too?
Facebook, which for sure is government creation.
Have you heard of Parler?
Yes, I think it's I think it's a little scammy, but whatever. I don't know. I've been warned against it, but I haven't done my own research. Look, anybody who's it's free speech is gone.
Stop. You're making me sad today, Monica. I want you to stop.
Sorry, I don't know what you thought you got, but why not explore what I'm saying that's hopeful?
But I think that's what we're doing, because when I finish our conversations, I go read up on the stuff you said. I learn a lot from you.
Don't get me wrong. I have been defending this system for almost a decade. I have been advocating taking the system on its own terms and asserting the contract as is, the Constitution. I have been, and it is, look at where we are. All the people I tried to wake up, they're still supporting Trump, who is just there to usher in the great backlash.
You have 7 minutes. You have about 8 minutes. You ready for this?
Sorry, I left off the question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It says, sorry, I left off the question mark about brute force can be used. Governments dominate public through superior force and work to sustain the system. not public good. Yes, that's true. And it's not just force. This is the thing that I'm discovering as my show is called The Propaganda Report, that it's the propaganda that controls the mind. They could not do it without controlling the mind. And that's why they're going for this great reset, the great transformation, the fourth industrial revolution, whatever you want to call it, Kissinger's order. Those are all things that those little buzzwords I just threw out there all have emerged since the Event 201/COVID pandemic thing that we're going through now. And it's all about getting us all plugged into this virtual world so that they can truly control us and our necessities, and they don't need us to control ourselves through this propaganda. They're constantly flooding us with propaganda of the deed, protests, all that kind of stuff, so that we allow this transformation to take place. And then after it takes place, we will have no ability to escape.
The other side, I want to give us, we the people, a little bit of a break.
I agree with Brad. Trade is greater than force. Agreed.
But here's the other thing that's sad, because we've allowed it. If you've got a business that's getting burned down, or if you've got kids you're worried about and family members are sick, how to change the overall government so it's better in 100 years is probably, I hate to say it, it's way down on your list, because I've got my lights may get turned off. I've got a sick mom, or my business is getting burned, or I'm losing friends. And so we've created a world now to where we're so busy living for tomorrow that we forgot that our kids are going to live with this shit in 100 years, our grandkids.
And this is why I've done everything I have done is 100%. I feel like I have a debt to the people who went before me, my father, and you can, although I question the origin of basically every single war, I do not question the motives of the soldiers who went and fought them. And I owe them, I have a responsibility to a debt to them to try to see this through, defense of liberty. And I also have a responsibility to my children to try to kick the can of tyranny down the road. And I'm just saying, I think that those efforts are proving inadequate, and there is this last resort thing. And I know, because I have this child with Down syndrome, it's very difficult to carve out any extra time. But I think that when you see this COVID thing or riots or whatever, and you say, if I can't get to the grocery store, I'm not eating tonight. That's just the reality.
I will say this, and I want to finish these comments up because I really, really want to make sure we value people that have come to be with us. What you just said about protecting this, what the soldiers did, and you and I have an obligation to that right there, that small, tiny platform is something that I think people like you and me can share. We can talk about how to get there, but if we can always have that as a touchstone, to me, that's where it starts. That's to me.
I know, but I think our paths diverge immediately, because because what I say is I appreciate what they did. And if you read the report from Iron Mountain, which I talk about all the time, they talk about how they disrespect, or that they talk about how it's the best people who get sucked into the war, that the soldiers are really the youngest, the healthiest, the strongest, the bravest. And they wish they could just take the old people and the sick people and throw them into the war instead. Sick. But in any case, here are those people, and I defend them. I would demand, however, that you wake up.
All right, we got to finish this. And I hear what you're saying. I'll tell you something else that's a problem. A lot of media folks, like a lot of people that could be leaders, are doing podcasts and are in that world. I wish they'd quit being influencers and go be leaders. I think there's a lot of people with good ideas that I listen to. Mainly people like Monica Perez should run for office.
What?
John,
I'm only going to do that to protect the property that I end up planting my first tree on.
Well, heck, I'll vote for you. Come live next to me, and I'll run as your vice mate. We'll protect each other's. You take the flame.
Unfortunately,
you take my 6 o'clock. I'll take the 12. We'll be good. John Jasper, it's us, but we were defeated through government education long before we knew we were at war. I think he's referring to when I said it's our fault.
It is our fault. Yeah. And I agree with that. The propaganda thing is very dangerous. And this is where the intergenerational element of it is so important, and why the answer of the Renee Wormser came up with for the foundations and how they were un-American back in the 50s, and the Reese Commission was a rule against perpetuities, which is for rule against perpetuities applies to people, wills, and inheritances, but it does not apply to corporations or foundations. So you can have these intergenerational subversions of fundamental liberty that you would not have if those organizations weren't way ahead of us. John,
okay.
Monica.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go. Monica,
only 3% of the population would be able to be personally responsible for their own actions. We are on apathetic society that as long as our internet, cell service, Taco Bell are fine. Yes, because that's possible. But that's where culture comes in. We have been intergenerationally transformed into a culture of dependence. And so you have to pull that Band-Aid off or something. That's why the UBI was the worst thing that could, that universal basic income was the worst thing that could possibly happen for the COVID thing, because people did not look at what was happening to them and why. If there was any science or connection to it, you were paid to sit on the couch. And that's exactly what people did.
And also they gave you $1,200, whatever. I didn't get any. They gave you some, so you didn't see the big magic hand going to billions over here that you don't know where it went. I didn't get any either, but they handed you this little check.
Oh, yes. And 95% of it did go to Taco Bell.
See, look at us agreeing.
Franny says, I am a public school history teacher. I've been told to choose only one of the Bill of Rights to go over briefly. Choose anyone and don't worry about the rest. Holy cow. Yeah, that Common Core does stuff like that too. I have never really cracked the code on Common Core, but the most important things, I mean, the 10 Commandments on the one hand and the Bill of Rights on the other, most important things that you could possibly teach or learn, John. But also because government spends millions of our money plotting against us while we just want to make ends meet. Absolutely. That is the nature of the inherent of the progressive income tax. So rich people, if you want to call idle rich, let's define rich as idle rich. The idle rich, they don't work. They're idle. They don't work. Income taxes never tax the rich ever.
Because they don't have income. Yeah.
It's progressive so that the most productive, most well-educated, hardest working people are robbed of the ability to what I call go Ron Paul. So
look at you and me agreeing.
Go Galt, you escape. I want to go Galt. But to go Ron Paul is to go to DC and change it. And you can't do that if all your surplus production has been absorbed in being used against you. And I can't believe that air conditioning is bad for me. No, John, no, no. We can't be friends anymore if you're going to. Those are the scales I want on my eyes. I don't take those scales off my eyes.
How do you get your iPhone if we don't have the world we live in now? I don't understand. Bottom line, are people inherently good or evil? ? All the people I know and associate with are generally good and would look out for me and others for my sake, but probably most for their own sakes too. That's works right. out.
I think that goodness is and love, charity is inherently necessary for the self-ordering society that we were kind of born to, because you might be the guy who gets his foot bitten off by a bear or whatever, and you better have been a good guy because nobody's going to feed you if you were a big fat jerk.
I agree with that. I will say this. I'm on social media all the time watching people tell on their neighbors about wearing masks and turning people in and the burning neighbor's house down if they disagree with you. I'm seeing a lot of things that make me go, and I know it's propaganda. You're about to say that, but I'm just saying I see a lot of human nature now that I go, it doesn't look like everybody's good. It looks like I better be ready to take care of some
Two
stuff.
things. One is, I have a document from the government that says that the CIA or whoever it is, means to and does enhance dysfunctional subcultures. They subvert a system by going in and intentionally enhancing dysfunctional subcultures, which is Karens or whatever.
Marxist.
But also, also, when they go in and the social media has anonymized, like the masks are doing. They're making people, even if your name is on it at this point, it used to be you couldn't even have your name on it. But now, I don't know you don't know me. Who cares? You can go out. Maybe it's a fake name. I don't know. And it absolutely makes people act terrible, which proves my point that it's society and it's the desire to be treated well that keeps people in line. So, and that ostracism, all of this stuff is about transparency and accountability, which happens in a community.
But we saw videos we shared a couple weeks ago. A principal turned in a kid that had a gun on the back of his wall, which was ridiculous. I saw 2 videos this week of men chasing women and screaming at them for. I'm telling you, I am watching people who have either not been spanked as a child or have never, especially grown men, that I think just need an ass whipping, that have never understood there's consequences for your words and how you treat people.
The culture has been subverted for a very long time. So like, would I say, oh, walk around America and give everybody the biggest guns you could possibly find, all the bullets,
I don't want to shoot out in my front yard.
I'm just saying, like, you don't have that. It needs to be some culture, some maturity, some experience, that's why the number one thing they do in order to change a culture is disconnect the generations. That's what the iPhone did to kind of us parents and kids right now. And birth control did it in the 60s. Think about that schism between the World War II vets and the Vietnam vets. I mean, that was a different world. So they take that stuff to create the schism. And if you want to have a healthy, organic culture, I mean, yeah, you could just blow the whole thing up and then that might emerge, but you have to understand that they have consciously imposed this dysfunctional system on us.
I think it's a small, not a huge step to go from we're a community. Let's have somebody enforce these said cultural rules so we can help them. We'll support them. To all of a sudden we have a council member. To all of a sudden we have a region. I just think government's inevitable when we go down that road.
But what's your point?
My point is,
let's have riots right now.
No, that's what I'm opposite. That's what I'm saying. I don't think we walk away from the American experiment.
It's not, but I mean, it may be inevitable. It may be inevitable because we're social animals, but it doesn't mean that it has to be coercive, and it doesn't mean that it has to be large scale.
So let's go. I say we just fix the one we're in, Monica. Dadgummit.
And I'm telling you, I dedicated 8.5 years at the expense of my family to do that, and it didn't work, and things are worse. And I was doing it with Obama, and I tried it with Trump, and I really lost hope when the same arguments that people would embrace when I used them against Obama, they argued against the very same people when I used those arguments against Trump. And that's how I know this is over. And Trump is ushering in the great backlash, and then it is well and truly dead, this American experiment. The
Wild West was a great example, but eventually it succumbed to the government disease. Agreed?
That's right. It was not so wild.
That's right.
So wild.
Lee Mansfield, the American dream is a nightmare. Thanks for commenting, dude.
Well, you have to elaborate on that.
Well,
define the American dream, and then tell me why it's a nightmare. Not you, Lee.
Yeah, Lee. I went to high school with Lee, so he'll do it. Mike Thompson, do you like most of Bob Barr's interpretations of law and the Constitution? So I'm assuming
Bill Barr,
I'm assuming he said Bill Barr. I'm assuming he meant Bill Barr.
Oh, he was the guy who oversaw Ruby Ridge and got the sniper who killed Vicky Weaver exonerated, and then he went and sniped at Waco. Barr is bad.
Okay, so we got to go.
I do like the Constitution.
I do too. Basically. We got to go, but I will say this too. I'm going to do a video this week on my page, and I might lose some friends over it, because one of the things that I'm hating we're doing is we're going back in time and we're pulling things out of people's past and saying that is them in totality. When in reality, I don't know of a person that doesn't have bad stuff in their history. I just don't.
Well, that's growth, right? I mean, we got growth, unless you want to plug into the fourth industrial revolution and get your chip. And it'll just not allow you, the way your car won't let you change lanes. If there's somebody in that lane, it won't allow you.
I'm not getting the chip. I'm not getting the chip or the vaccine. We're 64 minutes into it. We're wrapping it up. And you know what I did not do today? Because we took off like a horse race.
That's good.
We took off like
that you didn't tell people who we are, because we've been having a great conversation the whole time. And now they're still there, and you can tell them. You go first. Tell them.
You go first. Okay. I have during the break podcast.com. I have great conversations with cool, interesting people. I have dayfirepodcast.com. I have my buddy Dawson Wheeler used to own a really, really big outdoor retail outfitters company. And we talk to people who take adventures all around the world. So from hiking to waterfalls, climbing, paddling, camping, vanning, RVing, we talk about it.
That's so cool.
Yes, and I'm looking for Patreon and money, so because I'm the boy in the bubble, and I really need.
What is it? Patreon.com/
during the break. Yeah, because I can't. I think I've said this before. I lost 40% because of people backing out of radio shows and sponsorships when nobody was doing business. So
nobody's selling anything.
I'm trying to
tell me about it. I work every single day, and I do get the Patreon money, which I really, really appreciate. But
you're growing. I'm super excited for you because you're becoming a media badass.
But we should be able to pay the bills with ads, but there's not a lot of ads out there.
Tell
so
everybody.
The Patreon is very important. My podcast is called Propaganda Report. You can find that on any podcasting feed that you like, and subscribe across your podcasting platforms. That helps us go up in the search engine ranks. My flagship show, which I do with my co-host Brad Binkley, is during his Drive Time News Blast. It's similar to during Drive Time News Blast. It's 30 minutes every day of news of the day from a perspective of truth, liberty, and justice. It's really fantastic. And if you want more of that and our cocktail parties, and we're having a live event next week, if you want any of that, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/propaganda report.
Okay, real quick, you got to go. I love the daily show because it moves quick and it's perfect for my brain. And I can
it's the news of the day with a different, without all the propaganda spin.
So what I do is I listen to it, and then that night when I settle down, I'll start looking up stuff and going deeper myself, which I love that. So thank you for doing that.
That's what Brandy said. Glad for the discussion. Got to think about this stuff.
And then the last thing I'm going to say is, when are you guys putting merch out? When can I get a T-shirt or a hat or a mug? Or a wine glass?
Thanks to Franny. Franny sent me the name of somebody she really trusts. And then I have the logos and everything. So I'm pulling that together soon. Finally.
I will 100% do this show with you with like a cocktail glass. Or
we'll just sit there. And of course, cocktail glasses.
Why can't you have that?
I am going to.
For Patreon. If people want to be a Patreon, they get that a little extra. They get a cocktail glass.
Yeah, that's nice.
I know we went over what you like to go over, but I appreciate it.
Love you, babe.
Thank you very much. Monica Perez. Everybody go follow, subscribe.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Yes, yes, yes. All right, Monica and the world. Thank y'all. Bye, everybody.